Okay. I just read in a book about Coxeter, a famous geometer, that some geometer suggested that geometry lectures should be given in a totally darkened room so that there would be no drawings and no pointing to pictures allowed.
Well, your room is dark enough, I think. So.
But I'm pointing first to the picture in the upper left, which is everything that Reidemeister has to say in Knoten theory has to say with pictures about covering spaces. That, he says, really says it all. Because what I'm going to talk about is how to visualize covering spaces of knots, and in particular, how to visualize in a non-cyclic covering space the linking number between branch curves. So Reidemeister points to the trefoil with what he calls a half cylinder under it, and then proceeds with nothing but words to describe how you can construct any non-cyclic covering space of any knot. And I'm going to talk about three colored knots, and therefore the threefold non-cyclic covering spaces of knots. And that's what the top three figures on this little exhibit show. First, you start with like this cookie cutter cylinder, and then you make three copies of the three sphere with those actually three two cells depicted inside of it. And that gives you a cellular decomposition of the three sphere. And to make a three colored covering space, you take three copies of what you're looking at, that cellular decomposition of a three sphere, and you sew them together along that cylinder below the diagram in accordance with the colors assigned to each overpassing segment. And that means that one of them would connect copy one with copy two, another one would connect copy two with copy three, and copy three would be connected with copy one. Now, I don't know if that makes sense to anybody or not, because basically all you really end up looking at is one singular, one and one only diagrammic depiction of S3, but you're supposed to be thinking of three different ones of those glued together in different ways under the knot. And when you do that, you get what Hagard got in his 1899 thesis, which was a perfectly explicit cellular decomposition depiction of a covering space of a knot. And basically what I do to see the way the branch curves in this covering space, by the way, there are two branch curves in the three colored covering space of any knot, because if you make a little loop around the knot itself in the base space, that will lift upstairs to two different loops, one of degree 2 and one of degree 1. And those are the two different links or circles in the covering space that constitute the branch curves. And the way to see, in many cases, how they're linked together is depicted in my little right-hand drawing. Now, basically, what that does is it uses the concept of a canonical Seifert surface. And you may recall, you can, just working with the knot itself in normal three space, you construct a Seifert surface by inserting little twisted rectangles at each crossing. And then you get a set of circles which can be capped by discs. And Seifert showed that that can always be done for any diagram, and that what you get is an oriented surface that bounds the knot. And the canonical Seifert surface of a particular diagram isn't necessarily the minimal Seifert surface, but it's perfectly nice surface bounding the knot. So what I do in that third little picture on the right is I look for, and in this case find, a way to make something like a ciphered surface in the covering space itself. And what I do, or what that little picture on the right is designed to indicate that I'm doing in the covering space, is I'm inserting just one little twisted rectangle at the bottom crossing, and then two discs up in two different copies of the covering space. And what one could get if you do that carefully and in the right way, and if it works, is an explicit surface in the covering space that is bounded by one of the branch curves. In this case, it's bounded by the branch curve of index 2. Now, I don't know how to explain that other than through these pictures, and I hope that folks can understand these pictures, particularly the one on the right. Are there any questions about that? Hello, is anybody there?
Yes, we are all there. So everybody has the right to unmute himself if you have questions, okay? So if there are questions, they will ask, so don't worry about that.
Okay. Well, now the interesting thing about that, the way I construct a surface as indicated by the picture on the upper right, is that it doesn't work for all three colored diagrams. In fact, it's pretty clear that it's only going to work when the linking number upstairs is an integer, but it doesn't even work all the time then. It works about half the time for most of the knots, the three colored knots through, say, 11 crossings. And I did them, I computer calculated their linking numbers in my senior thesis many, many years ago. And in about half of the cases, they can be seen in this way. And a good example would be dropping now to the bottom three pictures. I don't know if these appear full screen anywhere. Alex, can anybody see these full screen? Because they're awfully tiny on what I'm looking at.
Okay, I mean, I can try to make bigger, I don't know, but do you see this bigger now? So
I just see it on a black bar on the left-hand side of my.
I mean, this is as good as as big as I can make it. Okay.
Okay.
So
can you see where my pointer is pointing?
No, you cannot. I cannot do this because I'm sharing.
Okay.
So I can only display. I can only display the picture. Okay?
All right.
So your pointer you will not be seen. You can see my pointer. Okay.
All right. Well, the picture of the knot itself is pretty clear because it's drawn in doubles, and what one could do is just draw that on a piece of paper and work from there. If anyone wants to follow what these three pictures at the bottom are showing, they're showing how to construct a surface in the three colored covering space of this knot that will demonstrate or show, or by looking at it, you can count the linking number between the two branch curves of the threefold cover. So if you just look at that drawing on the lower left, one of its nice properties is that it's happens to be a three bridge knot. I think I say here what knot it is. It's like 1087, I think. But it has the property that this diagram of this three bridge knot is what I call a weakly two bridge diagram. That means that you can generate the entire diagram by starting with just two segments. And I indicate with little letters, you can see them, the outermost left-hand side segment is one of those two. And the next one is the segment that it touches on its right, which is an inside segment. If you start with those two segments of the diagram and you label one of them 1 and the other one 2, you can then proceed around and fill in the 3 colors for the entire knot. Good. Can everybody see that full screen now?
I mean,
it's full screen on mine.
well, okay. So, I mean, I made it as big as I can make it. So I can zoom in a little bit more like this.
No. Zoom back out and pick up the whole thing. You've cut off the left hand there. That's perfect. That's fine. Yeah, I think that's big enough to see what's going on. I start by looking at the lower left-hand drawing, which is just knot 1087 with 2 segments indicated 1 and 2. And then if you move to the other 2 drawings, that's the same thing, but filling out all of the 3 colors for every segment. And because it's weakly 2 bridge, which means if you start with the 2 segments labeled 1 and 2, you can just proceed around and following the 3 coloring rule, you can end up labeling all the rest of the segments. And that's what the 2 drawings on the right have done. In addition, however, I've indicated, say for the middle one, I show 2 little twists, one in the top crossing and one in the upper left-hand crossing. And what those 2 little twists indicate are Seifert-like constructions of a surface that sits in the covering space. And if you look at the top one, it has 2 little numbers in Roman numerals on the 2 ends of it. And what that indicates is this: we're now looking at the top crossing of the middle drawing on the bottom. And what the little number 1 indicates is that half of the twisted rectangle is to be lifted to copy number 1 of the covering space. And since the covering space at that point is constructed by the intersection of 2 segments of the drawing labeled 2 and 3, what happens when you lift that little portion of the twisted disc to copy 1 is you're touching in both copies. In copy 1, you're touching the branch curve of index 2 on both of those segments. Because what the 2 represents is a gluing together of 3 copies of the drawing by gluing copy 1 to copy 3. And above that, in the covering space, is where the branch curve of index 2 sits. So if you slip a little twisted rectangle in copy 1, lift it to copy 1, you will be, its boundary will be a portion of the branch of index 2 above both of those upper right-hand segments. And what this drawing then proceeds to do is to construct a Seifert-like surface in the covering space, the boundary of which is the entire branch curve of index 2. And the way I do that is I start with the upper right-hand crossing and lift that little twisted rectangle into copies 3 on the left and 1 on the right. And that starts out bounding those little portions around the crossing of it bounds that portion of the branch curve of index 2. Then if you look at where the little Roman 3 is and start following, say on the left-hand branch, you follow your way around the knot. and you come to the next crossing where there's another little twisted rectangle inserted, this time in copy 3 on the top and copy 2 on the bottom. So those are the two lifted, twisted rectangles that define a Seifert-like surface in the covering space that is actually bounded by the branch curve of index 2. And one has to confirm that by starting at the top crossing in copy 3, moving around that outer left, upper left segment, which is labeled 1, and you move around to the next crossing where you get to another little twisted disc in copy 3, and there you follow along in copy 3 to go to the segment immediately to its right, which is also labeled 1. And now we're walking along the diagram of the knot, starting at the top intersection, going around to the left to the next intersection, and then going up and down the segment marked 1. And as you see, when you get to the next crossing, you're walking along in copy 3, and you're going under a segment that is labeled 3. And what that means is that copy 3 is copy 3 of the entire knot diagram is joined to copy 3 above that crossing, so that you can just proceed right under copy 3. And then you go down along something called 2, and you get to copy 3 again. So you just proceed happily along. Then you go all the way up, you get to copy 3 again, and you get back to the point where you started. So what you then have is a Seifert circle in the covering space, in copy 3 of the covering space, which, since you've gone, it's in copy 3. As you've wound its way around back to the point of origin, it only goes under segments labeled 3. Therefore, you can cap that circle with a disc in copy 3. And that disc will bound that entire portion of the covering curve, of the branch curve of index 2. And then going back to the upper left-hand side segment, where I insert a little disc that's lifted to copy 3 on top and copy 2 on the bottom. If you look at the part that's in copy 2, and you start there in copy 2, and you follow your way around that little loop that goes down to the right and comes back up on the left. It goes down in copy 1, it passes under 2 to 3, and then under 2 again back to 1. And what we're doing is we're in copy 2 walking along the knot. So there's no change at all, since you're just passing under walls that are glued together in copy 2. And what you then get is a little disc that you can insert in copy 2, just like a Seifert circle when you're using the canonical Seifert method. And it turns out with this diagram, the same is true for the little hanging tag on the top right in copy 1, which if you walk along the knot from there, you can go all the way around and back to yourself in copy 1, and you're only passing under segments labeled 1. So you can lift these 2 twisted discs and 2 twisted rectangles and 3 discs, 1 in each copy, and you get a complete surface which completely bounds the branch curve of index 2 in the covering space. And that then, because you can do that, and because you can see it, it gives you the means of seeing the linking number with the other curve. Because it turns out that the index 1 branch curve is indicated on this drawing by the numbers assigned to each segment. That the index 1 curve, for example, lives above the upper left segment in copy 1, and it lives above the upper right segment in copy 2. So you can actually follow where the index 1 curve goes in the covering space and see where it intersects these 3 disks, which are glued together along 2 twists to construct a co-boundary for the index 2 curve. And as it happens and always happens, the index 1 curve, when you've done one of these constructions, intersects the surface, Seifert-like surface that bounds the index 2 curve exactly over all of the untwisted crossings. And I've labeled them here plus or minus, depending on which way the index 1 curve goes through the disk that co-bounds part of the index 2 curve. For example, you can see on the middle left, you can see that segment that comes up 2, and that is sitting very close to a little disk that's been lifted to copy 2. And you can see right where just inside of the middle left segment, that segment labeled 2 comes from the bottom up, penetrating the disk in 2. And you can see that that's a left-hand rule crossing, which is why I've labeled the crossing that's the X, where the 2 goes through the 1 and the 3. I've labeled that a minus crossing. So if you can construct this sort of a semi-Seifert surface that bounds the index 2 curve in the covering space, you can actually just read off the linking number by looking at the unsmooth crossings and adding up their crossing numbers. Now, what I did to construct that thing in the middle, starting on the left, where that first left-hand twist goes in, the only way you can make one of these constructions work, and as I said, it doesn't work all the time, but the only way it can possibly work is if you put a little twisted rectangle in at every monochromatic crossing. And as you can see, I started here with the monochromatic crossing on the upper left. That's where a series of 1 segments come together. And I lifted the top to copy 3 and the bottom to copy 2. I could have started, as indeed I do in the diagram on the right, by taking that same intersection and lifting the opposite way, lifting the top to copy 2 and the bottom to copy 3. Because in each case, those little twisted rectangles co-bound the branch curve of index 2 upstairs. But if I do it the other way, as indicated on the lower right-hand diagram, by starting in the upper left-hand crossing and lifting the top to copy 2 instead of 3 and the bottom to copy 3 instead of 2, then as I proceed to try to extend that around the knot, I have to do different things in order to avoid what I guess might be called unconnected Seifert circles in the covering space. You'll see starting at the top of the upper left-hand crossing on the second diagram in copy 2, as I go around the knot, I hit copy 2. I go under copy 2 and I get another little disc that how to say, in order to fill it out and make it work, it just comes out with all different crossings, and mostly different crossings have to get filled in. But when all that is done, and you get a different set of ciphered circles that lift properly, all in the same copy number, you get on the right a different surface that co-bounds the branch of index 2. And the one on the right is a lot more complicated. I think it has a higher genus. And but it's, as you can see, it gets intersected fewer times. It gets intersected twice positively and twice negatively. So you get the same linking number, 0, but you get it in a different way, and you get it with an entirely different construction. Now, the fact that you have a 3 coloring, for which you can make a construction that it will lift in this way and show you the linking number, there's no guarantee of that. That doesn't always happen. But one of the lovely things is that when it does happen, and you get one of these drawings with a nice lifted cipher-like surface that co-bounds the branch curve of index 2, there are some easy ways to play with it so as to get a different knot or link, but one that also has a 3-colored covering where you can do the same thing, namely see what the covering what the linking number is between the branch curves and the covering. And for example, if you simply reverse, say, the crossing on the upper left of that lower middle drawing, you're gonna also get almost the same lifted surface that co-bounds the branch curve of index 2, but you will have reversed the upper left crossing, and therefore the rectangle, but that has no effect on the linking number. So if you have one of these diagrams for which you can see the linking number, you can reverse any monochromatic crossing and you'll get a different diagram, but it will also enable you to see the linking number. And then, as it happens, for any non-monochromatic crossing, for any tricolored crossing, if you remove the crossing and substitute a reversed double crossing in the same direction, you will preserve the 3 coloring, you will get a different knot or link, but you will change the linking number upstairs in a predictable way. Namely, if you go from a crossing to a reverse double crossing, the linking number will change by twice the negative of the crossing you reversed 2 times. So that if you start with one of these nice drawings that reveals its linking number in the 3-colored covering, you can generate an unlimited number of other ones. And that's what I wrote a little 2-page paper on. It'll be coming out sometime soon. This linking numbers in covering spaces are something that Reidemeister sort of took as a given in his book, and he ended up with spewing out all kinds of results without ever explaining how he had calculated them. And that led to Fox posing for me the thesis topic of explain how he calculated them. And the fact is that he never did. He had a student named Bankwitz who sat down and did all the horrible algebra to figure out how to calculate them for 2 bridge knots. Bankwitz's paper appeared 2 years after Reidemeister's book, so there never was any decent sourcing of it as being the explanation for what Reidemeister says at the end of his book. And but for my thesis, I just put that on a computer and did all the horrible computations. But I do think it's much nicer that in so many cases you can just see the answer. If you know what you're looking for, and you know how to construct a really just a slightly more complicated model of a canonical Seifert surface. That's pretty much what I had to say.
Okay, thank you.
I guess if you had something else you might post if I have a little more time.
Well, the problem is that somehow my
All right. Anyway,
so
as I say, this
you
will all be
hear me,
explained.
right? Well, the problem is that my Zoom froze, and I am unable to. I cannot open Windows and things like this. So what I can do is we will probably. I mean, I have your other file, but if you want me to show it, I probably have to shut down the entire Zoom, and then we have to log in again, unfortunately.
All it is examples.
So I mean, we can do this, but I mean,
because this is a it's just examples. This shows the magic of being able, in many cases, to actually see a linking number. Mm-hmm. And then I have a little paper that's coming out. It'll be in Journal of Knot Theory sometime soon, I guess. That shows how you can once you have one of these diagrams, you can just manipulate it by changing crossings to get it, as many different diagrams of all kinds of other different knots, to where you can also really see the linking number.